Hello and welcome to Diaspora News. I am Nancy Nelima. Scores of people have been injured in clashes in East Jerusalem in a confrontation between Palestinians, Jewish activists and the Israeli police. This is after the police efforts to keep the Palestinians and Jewish protesters apart. It follows a night of confrontations amid rising nationalist and religious tensions. And the WHO, World Health Organization, has urged African countries not to destroy COVID-19 vaccines that may have expired and wait for further guidance. This is after South Sudan and Malawi said they will destroy more than 70,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab after they expired in mid-April. The Africa Center for Disease Control, CDC, however, say that it's confirmed the doses were safe to use. Vaccines can be used up to 36 months after manufacture, but for COVID-19, there's not much data to clarify on the longevity of its effectiveness. And in other news, in the wake of today, a 20-year-old black American, Don Wright, was laid to rest in Minneapolis. He is yet another black man killed in the hands of police. Don Wright was shot dead during a traffic stop by former officer Kimberly Ann Porter, an incident that led to a mass protest across Minneapolis. Kimberly Porter was charged with second-degree manslaughter and is currently awaiting trial. This comes after a historic guilty verdict in the George Floyd murder trial. U.S. jury found a former police officer guilty of murder over the death of African-American George Floyd on a Minneapolis street last year. Chauvin was found guilty on 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. And finally, from India. India has been battling record-breaking cases and infections of COVID-19 as hospitals struggle with lack of beds and oxygen shortages. The variant, a B1617, has also been detected in the United States, Singapore, and Australia. This has been categorized by the WHO as a variant of interest, as a surge of critical patients and cases are being experienced across India. This is surely raising red flags as countries globally are putting up drastic measures to safeguard humanity and control the spread. And that is it for Diaspora News. I am Nancy Nelima.
Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Diaspora Fusion with Cecilia Lubanga. And this week, we are all about changing the African narrative in diaspora. But first of all, let us look at this week's spotlight, South Africa. South Africa is the southernmost country in Africa with 9 provinces. With over 59 million people, it is the world's 23rd most populous nation and covers an area of 471,445 square miles. About 80% of South Africans are of black origin, divided among a variety of ethnic groups. The remaining population consists of Africa's largest communities of white South Africans, Indian South Africans, and multiracial South Africans. It is bounded to the south by 2,798 kilometers of coastline stretching along the southern Atlantic and Indian Ocean, located entirely south of the equator. South Africa is a biodiversity hotspot with a diversity of unique biomass in plants and animal life. This country is a multi-ethnic society encompassing a wide variety of cultures, languages, and religions. Its pluralistic makeup is reflected in the Constitution's recognition of 11 official languages. According to the 2011 census, the 2 most spoken first languages are Zulu by 22.7% and Xhosa by 16%. The 2 next ones are of European origin. Afrikaners are 13.5%, developed from Dutch and serves as the first language of most colored and white South Africans. English 9.6% reflects the legacy of British colonialism and is commonly used in public and commercial life. South Africa is a developing country and ranks at 114th on the Human Development Index and the 7th highest in Africa. It has been classified by the World Bank as newly industrialized country with the 2nd largest economy in Africa and the 33rd largest in the world. It also has the most UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Africa. The country is a middle power in international affairs. It maintains significant regional influence and is a member of both the Commonwealth of Nations and the G20. However, crime, poverty, and inequality remains widespread, about a quarter of the population unemployed. Moreover, climate change is an important issue for South Africa. It is a major contributor to climate change as the 14th large emitter of greenhouse gases as of 2018 and is vulnerable to many of its impacts because of its water-insecure environment and vulnerable communities. South Africa has a general temperate climate because it is surrounded by the Atlantic and Indian Ocean on 3 sides, because it is located in the climatically milder southern hemisphere, and because its average elevation rises steadily towards the north and further inland. The country is ranked 6th out of the world's 17 mega-diverse countries. Ecotourism in South Africa has become more prevalent in recent years as a possible method of maintaining and improving biodiversity. Numerous mammals are found in the bushveld, including lions, African leopards, South African cheetahs, southern white rhinos, impalas, hyenas, hippopotamuses, and South African giraffes. A significant extent of the bushveld exists in the northeast, including Kruger National Park and the Sabi Sand Game Reserve, as well as in the far north in the Waterberg Biosphere. South Africa houses many endemic species, among them the critically endangered riverine rabbit in the Karoo. With more than 22,000 different higher plants, or about 9% of all the known species of plants on Earth, South Africa is particularly rich in plant diversity. The most prevalent biome in South Africa is the grassland, particularly on the Highveld, where the plant cover is dominated by different grasses, low shrubs, and acacia trees, mainly camelthorn. South Africa has lost a large area of natural environment in the last 4 decades, primarily due to overpopulation, sprawling development patterns, and deforestation during the 19th century. South Africa has a mixed economy, the second largest in Africa after Nigeria. It also has a relative high gross domestic product per capita compared to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Despite this, South Africa is still burdened by a relatively high rate of poverty and unemployment. South Africa has a 3-tier system of education, starting with primary school, followed by high school, and tertiary education in the form of academic universities and universities of technology. Learners have 12 years of formal schooling from grade 1 to 12. Grade R or grade O is a pre-primary foundation year. Primary school spans the first 7 years of schooling, and high school education spans a further 5 years. The National Senior Certificate Examination takes place at the end of grade 12 and is necessary for tertiary studies at a Southern African university. Public universities in South Africa are divided in 3 types. Traditional universities, which offer theoretically oriented university degrees, universities of technology, which offer vocationally oriented diplomas and degrees, and comprehensive universities, which offer both types of qualifications. In 2004, South Africa started reforming its tertiary education system, merging and incorporating small universities into large institutions and renaming all tertiary education institutions as university. By 2015, 1.4 million students in higher education have benefited from a financial aid scheme which was promulgated in 1999. The South African black majority still uphold the country's culture despite westernization taking root in the 21st century. Aspects of the traditional culture have declined, but often we see the culture in the dress code and music. There is great diversity in South African music. Black musicians have developed a unique style called kwaito that is said to have taken over radio, television, and magazines. Of note is Brenda Fassie, who launched to fame with the song Weekend Special, which was sung in English. South Africa has produced world-famous musicians. South African cuisines is diverse. Foods from many cultures are enjoyed by all and especially marketed to tourists who wish to sample the large varieties available. South African cuisines is heavily meat-based and has spawned the distinctively South African social gatherings, a variation of the barbecue. South Africa has also developed into a major wine producer, with some of the best vineyards lying in valleys around Stellenbosch, Franschhoek, Paarl, and Bredal. South Africa's most popular sports are association football, rugby union, and cricket. Other sports with significant supports are swimming, athletics, golf, boxing, tennis, ring ball, and netball. Although football commands the greatest following among the youth, other sports like basketball, surfing, and skateboarding are increasingly popular. It's yet another busy day for the capital city of Kenya, Nairobi. And for one, Grace Wambere, her doors are open today for yet another business day, waiting for clients to stream in and pick their stocks. Let us see what she has for us this week. This is Diaspora Fusion. Hello and welcome to Diaspora Fusion. And this week we are featuring one major business owner in Kenya who has been out of the country for the last 8 years, and now she's in the country and running a clothing business, and she is Grace Wambere. How are you, Grace?
I'm fine.
How have you been?
I've been well.
How's
Keeping
business?
safe.
Actually,
we must.
Yeah, exactly. You know, COVID-19 has been there, and so far we have been dealing with the pandemic for the last almost 1.5 years in the country, and it has been challenging for the Kenyan economy. Now let's talk of your business. Grace, you've been out of the country for the last 8 years, right?
Yes, I was out for 8 years. That was 2004. I came back in 2011. Then, here I am.
Okay. So what exactly did you go to pursue for the 8 years?
IT. I was doing IT in Germany.
Oh, so you went with the mission of pursuing studies?
Exactly.
Yeah. Why not in the country? And out of the country?
Back then, IT wasn't so much in Kenya, and my goal was to go somewhere outside the country. I studied IT, and then I come back, I start my own IT company.
Exactly, yeah. Did you achieve that?
I started, yes, after coming back then, I found my way in Mitumba. But I'm still using the IT in my Mitumba. That is marketing, the graphic and designing. Yeah, but I'm not intensely doing IT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Mitumba business.
Mitumba business, so far I can't complain. But it's hard work and working smart. I think that's what has brought me this far. Once you do it right, you can make it. You can pay your bills, you can do it, a lot of investments, but you have to do it right. Yeah.
Now, Grace, this week you're dealing with retailing the history of Africa in diaspora, whereby in most cases we have had ourselves being portrayed by the other nations as a less superior continent. Like when you're black, you're poor, you're not capable of doing things. So tell us, you've been out of this country for the last 8 years. How has the experience been for you being out of the country?
The experience was quite interesting. I learned a lot. But then I also saw that people out there see us as, actually you'll be saying you're from Kenya, but they'll call you an African.
Okay. As
in, how is Africa? Do you run? They say you're from Kenya, they all think that you run. So they're actually very ignorant when it comes to knowing our culture. But it made me stronger, that I had to prove something. So right now I'm working with a lot of them. Like when I'm importing from Canada, I'm working with the Canadians. If it's Germany, the Germans. So you have to also, now they come running after me. They send me messages, Grace, would you like us to pack some bills for you, Kenya? So at the end of the day, it made me stronger and it made me see the bigger picture. Yeah.
Did you face any scenarios of racism or being discriminated when it comes to certain things or services?
Actually, I'm a light skin, but I remember shaking hand with someone and they were like, they thought I've applied that on them. Because, but I understand it was in a small village somewhere in Germany. They've never seen a black person. And I remember an old woman calling me a negligent. A negligent in German is a nigger, but a small version of a nigger because I'm a bit small.
That's sad.
And it was hurting, yeah. But then the people I was with, they tried to explain to me, for us, as in here, for them, nigger is a black person. So don't take it personally.
Wow.
Sometimes going into a store, you want to buy some nice shoes, you're holding the shoes, and then the person who is selling will come to you and tell you, this is 50 euros, right? Like, you are black, you can't afford.
Okay.
And that's when you go in your pocket and you're like, here, and you pay even if you didn't want to.
Oh, that's so sad. And do you think, is it because we as the black race, are we carrying out ourselves in a manner that we are showing the world that we are less superior or something?
That's what we do. And we worship them.
Unfortunately.
That's where it starts. We worship. You see a white person in a restaurant, even here in Kenya, and you'll skip me God served them first. So we're already showing them they are mightier than us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, just about that, do you think that aside from what you experienced, do you have any good experience that you had while in Germany?
I have. I've met good people. They are good people also. They are good Germans also who have explored the world, maybe who have come for holidays here in Kenya or in other places in Africa. And there are those who believe in us. So I've had a good experience. I was in university, I was studying with them, and we used to have even those group studies with them. So not all, but there are those.
So in short, we can just say the world has a fair share of bad people and good people.
Exactly. Same as here. Everywhere.
Okay. Now let's get back to the business. Why did you come up? When did you decide that this is what you want to pursue, and where did you come up with the idea from? Is it because you're out of the country and you felt it's something that you would do, or it's something that you just came up with?
I think mitumba is more because of growing up with clothing, as in like my mom is a tailor, and people saying that. So I grew up knowing fashion, and it's something that has always been in me. But coming back, I never thought that in my life, because we are always studying to do better than our parents, for example. So I never had that idea that I'm coming back to start mitumba. I was coming back to start an IT company, and I did it. But I did run for long. I did it for only 1 year. And then I found myself pregnant, and now when I started shopping for the baby, that's when this idea of mitumba came in. Then, yeah, I started small, and here I am.
For how long now?
Now these are 8 years.
These are 8 years of doing mitumba business in the country.
I started in 2013.
Oh, nice, nice. And when did you rise to the point of being a major supplier in the country?
That was 2017.
2017. Yes, and it's a stiff competition. Definitely, you're not the only one doing this business in the country.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you manage to conquer the challenges? Because you have been out of the country for the last 8 years, doing something different and coming back to embrace something totally different. So, how did you maneuver through this tough industry?
Now that's where my IT comes in, and living in Germany comes in, because I got that confidence of social media. So everyone was like, I'll be conned. They had that fear of putting their numbers online. So I actually started it on Facebook. And I've always had that thing of helping people, or if you ask me for advice, I'll never keep it for myself, because I also want to see other people, because I believe if my sister is having a good job, my neighbor is having a good job, we'll have a better community. But if I'm the only one, then I've been alone suffering, because everybody will be stopping me, give me 100, give me 500. But if everyone has something, actually we can have a get together and have a reunion and tukule mbuzi. But now, I decided to go this year online. People would ask me questions because I was posting, I'm opening a bail for kids. I post the photos, and then people would come asking me, where did you get the bail from? How did you manage to price them? How do you price them? And then I could answer. So that's how I grew. So people started getting that more confidence in me. Although I started in the house, when I opened the shop, now they got even this confidence of coming to my shop. I would invite them to come see when I'm opening, the way I'm sorting them out, the way it's done in Gikomba, because I was in Gikomba before, opening bales there. So I would come and show them how it's done. That's where the confidence of everybody around me came, and then my group, Mitumba Chapter, started growing, getting more referrals, people joining, and up to date I do that. Yeah.
Now let's talk of the Kenyan diaspora investment. Now we have seen, aside from you're either investing into business or you're coming up with something that eventually it's more like giving back to the country. Was that your goal when you decided that you're coming to invest back into the country?
Exactly, like mostly offering employment and paying the tax. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Kenyan diaspora investment. We have seen scenarios whereby some Kenyans would wish to invest back, but they fear, or rather, there's a tendency of people who just do things for the sake of giving back to the country. Was that your goal from?
Yes, it was. Mostly employment, because there you can see even those who are not employed, they're still getting some money from the government. But here we've got so many unemployed people. So my goal has up to date has been always expanding so I can offer more employment. And I've seen it working.
Or is it the reason as to why you're offering these trainings? Because I've seen on social media you're actually offering trainings to individuals who are doing business. You know, it's something very rare because some people would choose to keep everything to themselves. Like, I have this idea, I've started, I'm major, so it's me in this industry. But eventually we see you do these trainings.
Yeah, because if I'm not offering employment, I cannot have them all here. Then I'm giving you an idea to go invest, to go start a business. And I've seen people starting from 2,000 bob to opening bills, and that makes me happy when someone comes and tells me, Grace, now you know what I can pay school fees for my kids from where I started. So that's why. Yeah.
Is there any skill that you learned from Germany that actually you are applying it right now, apart from just pursuing IT? Because definitely IT and selling clothes, they're not quite, you know. Yeah, exactly.
I learned a lot about the most important part, keeping time. If it's 9, it's 9. If I'm late, it's 9:05. Yeah. Kenyans, 9 can be 11. You go and you come without any apology. That's what we need to. Another important thing I learned is that openness and being genuine. I'll tell my client, this is China Bell, and if it's China Bell, it's China Bell. If it's Uganda, it's Canada, it's Canada. If it's UK, it's UK. If it's grade 1, it's grade 1. If it's grade 2, it's grade 2. So that openness and genuineness, I learned from them and they, you know, they are very straightforward. Even with my employees, they can tell you, if you wrong me, I will tell you there. I will not keep it to myself. I'll tell you there, you've wronged me here. It's supposed to be done like this. So no keeping things and then I don't know, I come behind your back, I fire you. That straightforwardness also. Because they are very strict and straightforward. Yeah.
Now we have seen individuals coming together. We have seen programs where we are having individuals in diaspora coming together and actually starting projects in the country, be it coming up with estates or running a business. Do you ever think that you might consider something of the sort?
Yes, I have thought about it.
You've thought about it?
Time. So we've started somewhere small, and hoping it will grow. Yeah.
Okay. Now something else. Of course, there are Kenyans who will wish to go to diaspora eventually and pursue something different. Probably it could be education, it could be just life itself. Of how much value is that to the country? Or to an individual rather, not necessarily to the country, but to an individual.
Exploring.
Yeah.
You go, you see different way of living, different cultures, you learn, and by the time you're coming back, you're a very, very open-minded person. You're not, you see, it's the same way we say when you stay in the village, this person who was left in the village and those people who came to Nairobi, they are two different people. Even when they meet, you can see that there's a difference. So if you can manage and go, there's no problem. Go learn, so see how other people live, how people run things, and if you decide to come back, you'll be a totally different person. And a better one. And although some will go and do their own things and come back, they'll be deported, but I think it's a very small number.
Wow, an amazing interview with Grace Wambere. She's just among the many Kenyans who have come back into the country and done something productive for their country. This is Diaspora Fusion. We are living in a digital era where Africa has always been portrayed as an inferior continent with no hope for their people. But is Africa truly poor? First, let us start with Africa at a glance. And this week we are all about changing the African narrative in diaspora. And on board, I'm having Dr. Christine Owinyi, who is a National Leadership and Learning Facilitator at the Kenyan Education Management Institute. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's such a wonderful topic to talk about our continent, Africa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are living in a digital era,
Yeah.
whereby we have seen Africa being portrayed as a lesser continent with no wealth, or rather they can't even depend on themselves, or rather they can't even be able to empower themselves to the greatest levels that any human being can reach. Do you think that is so?
Well, I can say, yes, it is true that Africa has been portrayed as actually a dark continent, as in a continent where nothing good can come out of it. And even Africans are called blacks. You know, when you look at our skin color sincerely, is it black? It's not. It's only that we have a dark complexion. And the people in the West have got a light complexion. They are not white. So because of that mentality that we are black, they are white, and so even Africans have been made to believe that then we are lesser, you know, which is not really true.
Yeah, exactly, because I don't think it's not a matter of trying to associate somebody as lesser by the fact of their skin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because in Africa we have quite a number of people who are very intelligent. Like I know, Cecilia, you're very intelligent. And I know you can compete so well with anybody in the world, you know, and you can even do better than people in the West. So we cannot say that we are a lesser continent. It's only that we have been brainwashed to believe that there is nothing good that can come out of our continent. Yeah.
Now, okay, coming into that, do you think it's our fault? Because first of all, I don't think it's all whites who really consider us as maybe a lesser race or something. But do you think to some extent we play a role in how we are portrayed out by other countries?
Oh yes, we Africans really portray, as in we play a big role. Like when we meet the people from the West, the way we receive them, the way we highlight them, like, oh, they've come, kuja uone mzungu, you know, we call them mzungu. Even our own children are made to believe that the mzungu is better than the African. So they will want to run and look at the mzungu, and yet the mzungu is just like us, you know? Yeah. Okay. And when we are there, they look at us like apes, you know? Yeah, they want to run away from us. They are looking at us like, yeah, this is something really bad, you know. But when they come to Africa, we look at them like, wow, this is something really good. I think it's about the mindset. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Now, talking about that, let's talk of oral history, because everything has a root. For someone to begin considering you as someone who is lesser or someone who is not important, there must have been something that has triggered that. Now, what's the role that oral history is playing in the communication of this information to the outside world, whereby maybe you heard your grandmother tell you something about Africa, then your grandmother telling your mom, and your mom telling you, and you telling your children. What's the role of oral history in this?
You know, the way we communicate from one generation to the other, like the oral history in Africa, the kind of stories that we were told and our parents were told by their great-grandparents and so on and so forth. And now that our children are being told stories by their grandmothers, you know, it's like something that is rotational, moving from one generation to the other. And that kind of stories, like the folk tales, the legends, the myths, that is what we really uphold as Africans. Like that is what is very important for us. We have not embraced other means of communicating, telling our people that things were like this, but now where we are moving to, things are going to be like this. We've remained in the past.
So it's possible that maybe the information is being distorted with time.
Yeah, exactly. That is very true.
Okay. Now, let us look at education. Do you know, in schools, history is taught as a subject. Yes. And eventually, when you come from scratch to being a higher learning student, there's something you've mastered along the way. What role should the higher learning institutions, or rather the education sector, do when it comes to telling the history of African diaspora?
Well, it is important to talk about the history of Africa in the diaspora, in the sense that the culture is also good. There are things in our African culture that really promoted things to do with values, virtues, that helped us to become moral in the society, to become good people in the society, to be able to live with people comfortably, you know. And so even at the university level, as much as we want to say that some things are past time, it is important to uphold our history as Africans, but not to put a lot of emphasis that this is very important. Yeah.
How best can we tell the history of Africa right now? How can we retell that history? Because already there's information that is out. We can't change the mindsets of people right now, but at the end of the day, we want to work towards changing the story in how the entire world views us.
Well, we can retell the history of Africa in a different way because our children today are actually 21st century kids. They are not kids of the 19th century or the centuries behind us. So if our children could use what they have right now, the aspects of creativity, talents, and so to turn what was to be what is and what will be. So I think that way we will turn the story of Africa to look a little bit brighter than the way it is portrayed.
Yeah. Whose responsibility is this? Because, okay, we are talking of kids. Kids interact with teachers, they interact with the outside world, and it's hard to really try to see what a kid is going to consume at the end of the day. So who's the main people to play this role in doing this?
Of course, the main people to play this role are the adults. It's not just about the teachers, it's not just about the church, it's about everybody in the society, starting from parents, coming out to teachers, to wherever they go to church, to mosques. It has to be a collective role to help our children portray our history in a positive manner. Yeah, if we could embrace the fact that our children are talented and gifted differently and assist them by helping them bring in the aspects of the history of Africa in what they are doing, like when they are dancing, you know, when they are doing their drama, you know, it can bring out a very different picture from what people perceive about Africa. Yeah.
Now you brought out the factor of talent and embracing what the kids are good at. Now we have seen with time most parents, or rather most individuals, have preferred to have their kids pursue education out of this country with the mindset that probably our education is not enough to nurture a student, or rather a kid or any person, to become whoever they wish to be. Do you think that is so?
Yeah, it is true, because most people who are rich, so to say, don't have their children learning in Kenya. Yeah. For example, in Kenya, in our country, Kenya, yeah. And if at all they are learning in our country, Kenya, they are taking a different system from that offered by the government of Kenya, for instance. Yeah. But it is important to be patriotic. You know, as much as you are imagining that your child should receive what is better, and there is another child who should receive what is lesser, we are doing disservice to our own continent. Yeah, but right now what we are doing, like in the Ministry of Education, we have started a different curriculum, which we are calling the competency-based curriculum, where our children are now being nurtured through values, knowledge, attitudes, and even skills. That as our children grow up, it's not just about content in the head. It's about their passion. It's about what they can be able to do and actually show that they are able to do this and this and that. Yeah, so the mindset that people have that the curriculum in the African countries is not the best, or the education system is not the best, I don't think it's right, because there is something good in what we have, and if we can embrace what is good, yeah, then we can really do something good in our continent. Yeah.
Now, Let us talk about the wealth that is in Africa. We are having resources that actually they're being used by the world. Let's talk of gold, let's talk of diamond. Like in short, Africa is just wealthy in a way. But in most cases, we find that most of these resources, they're being processed out of the country, they're sold best out of the country, you understand? So could it be possible that as Africans, we are sitting on our resources and are not being creative in how we grow ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's because of the way we were brought up. The school system, rather the education system that most of the adults went through, it was about passing an exam and going to an office to work. You know, we were not given the skills to do the nitty-gritties of maybe mining gold and so on and so forth. And the people that were towards that line, they were always considered as lesser beings, yeah? So because of that, now the people from the West took advantage of what is ours. And so because they took advantage, it is really very difficult for us now to push them out once. It has to be progressive.
But wait, is it a matter of pushing them out or just collaborating with them for the sake of gaining the skills? Because at the end of the day, you know, we can't run away from the past and facts. Yes. Fact is probably to some extent, we as Africans, there's some things we don't have yet. Yes. There's some skills that have not been cultivated in the continent, yes, but maybe they're best received by other continents. So
yeah, that is why in the education system, we are actually saying as much as the people with the skills are on the sites, our students should go there and learn from them. And as in the process of learning, you know, with time, we'll have more of ours being there and less of theirs being there. As much as there is that collaboration, the moment they will now realize that we are able to do it on our own, we will be empowered. You know, we don't have to continue relying on the people from the West throughout our lives. Yeah, we collaborate for some time, and there is something I call collaboration, yeah? We collaborate more and compete less. In the process of collaboration, we will be able to get the skills, catch the skills, and with time, we become experts along those lines, and so we'll not need more of them doing the things that we can do on our own. Yeah, so
nice.
That is actually what I meant by, I didn't really literally mean pushing them away. Yeah, it has to be progressive. Okay. Yeah.
That is so amazing. So much information still lined up for you on Diaspora Fusion. Don't go too far. Right, welcome back on Diaspora Fusion, and still we are discussing about changing the narrative of Africa in diaspora. And still on board, I'm having Dr. Christine Owinyi. So we'll still continue the discussion. Yes. And we're talking about education. Parents preferring to take their students out of the country to pursue further education, and them staying there or rather coming back and doing something in the country. So I wanted us to talk about brain drain in Africa. We are having so many skilled personnel who go out of the country and they choose not to come back. Why do you think this is the reason?
Well, there are many factors that make people not want to come back to their continent, so to say. Now, one of them is what we said. Already Africa is portrayed as a poor country. So when they get to the West, they see different things and they imagine they cannot cope when they go back home. So they opt to stay there, you know. So, and another reason as to why our children opt to remain in the West after their studies probably is because they feel like if they came back, they could not be given what is adequate in terms of payment, given that they are now highly skilled to get the appropriate employer to pay them as much as they ought to be paid. So that is another reason why our children opt to stay in the West instead of coming back to the continent to develop their own countries. And another reason is probably the fact that people are already brainwashed. The Africans already imagine that the West has everything that is best. There is nothing good back in Africa. So when they get there, they are making a lot of money probably using foreign currencies, And when those currencies are sent back home, it becomes really a lot of money. So imagining living such to come to a place that is portrayed to be that poor, it's actually a challenge. And another aspect is the culture that we have in the African continent. There is this thing called corruption. You know, it is known everywhere that Africa is leading when it comes to corruption. So it really boils back to the leadership styles, the leaders in the African continent. What are they doing to do away with corruption? Because when our children go to the West, the way they are trained, the way they are brought up, you know, they are given a different way of looking at life. So when they imagine that going back to their homes, they will be corrupted, you know, they'd rather stay where they think they are okay than go back to their homes.
Like you say, 9 countries, that is Ethiopia, Kenya, Malawi, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, have lost more than 2 billion since 2010 from trained doctors who then migrated out of the countries. Annually, it is estimated that Africa loses around 2 billion through brain drain in the health sector alone. So imagine, you're just looking at the health sector alone. We have not looked at other skills, that is, you know, when it comes to education, talented individuals. Don't you think this is the reason as to why we as the continent will always be considered as a poor continent? Because the moment we have skilled individual going out and trying to invest the ideas and the skills in other countries, don't you think it's a major problem for Africa as a continent?
Yeah, actually it is a major problem for the African continent, because if we had these people in our countries, then we could be talking of a totally different story. Yeah, because if we had them do the work in our own countries, for example, the doctors, we couldn't be having so many people dying because of diseases that probably can be handled locally. We couldn't be having so many people traveling overseas to be treated. And apparently it's ironical that when they go there, they find African doctors handling them. It is ironical, yeah? So I think, yeah, it really contributes. It's very true, yeah, there's a problem.
Especially now that there's COVID-19. You see, we are having vaccines mostly coming from other countries, yet we have medics in Africa, skilled enough to probably even try come up with vaccines for the African continent or even the world at large, right? Yeah, okay, now, how best then can we change this narrative? Because at the end of the day, it's about trying to change what is already existing. At the end of the day, we can gain confidence and pride in who we are, because we can never change the history. We came from an early man. We lived in mud houses. Our land was at some point bushland and stuff like that. How best can we change this narrative?
You know, we can start by advocacy. Yeah, just being positive and proud that you belong to Africa and going out there talking about Africa in a positive way. It is possible to change this narrative. And then when it comes to leadership and governance, if our African leaders could come up with policies, if at all we have our children going abroad to study A, B, C, D, yeah, what can make them come back? How are they going to be accommodated if they came back home? How are they going to get jobs? How are they going to be taken care of? Yeah, the standards should at least be not far from what they are having in the Western countries. And then another thing, I think, Cecilia, mindset change. You know, you cannot force people to change their mindset. Yeah, but we can do it progressively. It is just one candle, light your candle and light the other candles around you. As the more candles are being lit, then we'll have the whole of Africa transforming to the positive. Yeah.
Now, talking of the factor of unity, are we as Africans our own enemies when it comes to development?
Oh yes, it is very true. It is very true, because we Africans are known to be jealous. That is a fact. Yeah,
really?
It starts from, back to our homes. You know, if you see somebody's child doing better than your child, you know, people start talking negatively about the other family that is doing well, and that way it's not possible to unite. Yeah, so if we started from the grassroots, our own homes, we start doing things together, appreciating one another, accommodating one another. If so-and-so's child is doing well, let us use that skill to improve our children. Make use of what we have locally, the skills we have locally, to improve our own children and our own ways of doing things at the local level before we even move to the national level. If everybody took it positively, that everybody has a weakness, yeah? And if I have a strength, I can use that strength to help the other person who is weak in that area, and all of us will become strong, then we will be able to improve our continent. Yeah.
It has been a very amazing and insightful session during this week's Diaspora Fusion. See you next time, same place. As always, my name is Cecilia Lubanga.